Have you ever noticed that the more available you are, the less you're respected? The more loyal, the more ignored. The more forgiving, the more disposable. Today, we're going to solve the brutal truth behind this pattern and why walking away is not weakness. It's the most powerful move you can make. Respect is not something others simply hand over to you out of kindness. It is not given freely, nor is it secured by constantly proving yourself. In the brutal mechanics of human psychology, respect stems from how you are perceived, never how much you beg, serve, or sacrifice. People respond not to your intentions but to your posture. The more you chase approval, the more invisible you become. The more accessible you make yourself, the less mysterious and therefore less valuable you appear. A man who tries to prove his worth is already at a disadvantage. In the eyes of others, he is signaling that he doubts his own value. This self-doubt does not remain hidden. It bleeds into every interaction. The irony is that the more you do for others in order to be seen as valuable, the more they internalize the belief that you are beneath them, not because they are evil, but because human nature subconsciously devalues what is overabundant. Think of power not as something you hold in your hands, as something others believe you hold. It is the illusion, the image, the perception of control that governs how people treat you. The moment you speak too much, explain too much, give too much, you peel back the curtain and reveal your vulnerability. And in doing so, you invite exploitation, not appreciation. You must understand that people only honor what they fear losing. They don't treasure what's always there. Instead, they begin to expect it, assume it, and then ignore it. This is why walking away creates such a powerful shift. Not because leaving makes you better, but because it reshapes how others perceive your strength. When you choose absence over argument, distance over desperation, you introduce uncertainty. You turn the tables. Now they wonder what you're thinking. Now they replay what they said, what they did, and why you left. They reflect because you've removed the comfort of your continued presence. In the dynamics of power, perception is the weapon. A man who does not flinch, who is willing to lose everything rather than be disrespected, is dangerous. Not because he is cruel, but because he is free. People cannot manipulate someone who has nothing to prove. They cannot control someone who is willing to walk away without a word. And this frightens them. It awakens their dormant respect. Not admiration for your kindness, but reverence for your cold discipline. Consider a king. Does he walk among the people daily, begging to be seen? Does he ask to be respected? No, he keeps a distance. He shows himself rarely, and when he does, it is with deliberate silence and presence. This mystery magnifies his power. The unknown becomes a source of awe. The distance becomes a source of dignity. You must do the same. When you are constantly explaining your worth, giving without boundaries, and proving your loyalty, you place yourself beneath others. You exchange mystery for availability, and in that trade, you lose their respect. People are not drawn to those who explain themselves. They are drawn to those who command attention without asking for it. This requires you to resist the urge to overcompensate. It demands that you allow people to form their own conclusions, especially when those conclusions come from your silence, not your justification. There is a silent transaction occurring every time you engage with someone. They are assessing your posture, your energy, your availability. They are silently calculating whether they should respect you or not. And if you appear desperate to earn that respect, the transaction is already over. You've lost before the negotiation even began. Your eagerness to be liked, understood, or forgiven will always work against you in a world that rewards strength over sentiment. To be respected, you must embody power. And power, in its purest form, is restraint. The restraint to not react emotionally. The restraint to not beg for what should be voluntarily given. The restraint to walk away without an announcement, without a final speech, without a dramatic exit. Just silence, just space, just absence. This absence rewrites the entire dynamic. It forces others to confront their treatment of you. It repositions you as someone who values himself beyond external validation. And once they sense that you don't need them, that you don't require their presence to complete your worth, they begin to question their own value. This is when respect begins to grow, when they realize that your silence is not a cry for attention, but a declaration of self-sufficiency. The man who understands this never feels the need to overextend. He is deliberate in his actions and cold in his detachment. Not because he lacks emotion, but because he refuses to be governed by it. He is not desperate to be seen, heard, or loved. He is focused on being respected. And respect, unlike love, is not built by closeness. It is built by boundaries. There is a certain power that only emerges in your absence. A silent leverage that words cannot produce. The man who walks away without explanation, without apology, and without hesitation instantly gains a form of control that those who cling never experience. Walking away is not a retreat, it is a psychological maneuver. It is a statement of strength made without words. When you walk away, you unsettle the balance of power. You shift the dynamic from one of dependence to dominance. Those who once felt confident in their ability to ignore, exploit, or belittle you are now forced to face a version of you they cannot influence. People assume that power is found in confrontation, in raising your voice, asserting your opinion, or demanding your worth. But true leverage is created in withdrawal. When you remove your presence, you remove your energy, your support, and most dangerously, your attention. This attention, whether they admit it or not, is a source of validation to them. The moment it disappears, they begin to spiral. Not because they suddenly care more, but because they suddenly realize they no longer have control. Leverage is the ability to influence others without revealing your own intentions. And nothing is more disorienting to a person than when someone who once tolerated everything suddenly tolerates nothing. The power dynamic reverses in an instant. You become unpredictable. You become scarce. You become dangerous. And it is this unpredictability that creates psychological tension. They start asking questions they never asked before. Where did he go? Why did he leave? That tension, that uncertainty is your leverage. Most people are conditioned to react, to beg, to chase, to prove. They fear walking away because they believe it signals defeat. But that's a misinterpretation of reality taught by the weak to keep others weak. In truth, walking away signals self-sufficiency. It shows you are not afraid to lose what doesn't value you. It communicates a powerful message. You are not my only option. That message shifts fear into the other person. Now they are afraid of losing access to you. Now they are afraid that someone else will benefit from what they once dismissed. Your indifference becomes their burden. Understand that most people only recognize your value when they are forced to confront your absence. As long as you are always available, your worth is measured by convenience. But the moment you disappear, they are forced to measure you by memory. This memory, often blurred and incomplete, now becomes idealized. The human mind romanticizes what it can no longer reach. In your absence, they create a version of you more powerful than any version they interacted with. This illusion, born from silence, is what begins to haunt them. This is why leverage is never gained through argument. You cannot convince someone to value you. You cannot force someone to see your worth while still placing yourself beneath them. The only way to shake their perception is to remove yourself entirely, not in anger, but in calm silence, not as revenge, but as revelation. You walk away not to hurt them, but to liberate yourself. And in doing so, you gain something they can never take away: autonomy. Autonomy is the foundation of leverage. A man who is not emotionally enslaved to the opinions, actions, or presence of others holds the ultimate advantage. He can leave when necessary. He can endure loss without collapse. He does not need to convince, because he knows that the only thing worth keeping is what doesn't have to be begged for. This internal detachment manifests externally as power. People feel it in your tone, in your timing, in your refusal to explain. They realize that you don't need them, and that realization is what makes them need you. The problem is that most people are too afraid to walk away. They fear what will happen if they stop trying. But that fear is the very chain that binds them to disrespect. The man who can sever this chain becomes untouchable. He no longer acts out of desperation, but from a position of control. His silence becomes strategy, his distance becomes discipline, and his absence becomes a presence more powerful than any physical confrontation. Leverage also introduces something even more devastating to those who once underestimated you: doubt. Doubt erodes confidence. It whispers in their mind late at night. It forces them to question the decisions they made when they believed you would never leave. This doubt is not loud. It is subtle, invasive, and persistent. It makes them regret. It makes them reconsider. And it makes them respect you in a way they never could when you were constantly available. The moment you walk away, the script changes. You are no longer the one trying to be chosen. You become the one who decides. You dictate whether or not you return. You determine what is worth your time. This is leverage in its purest form, the ability to influence others by not needing them. Not because you don't care, but because you care more about yourself, respect than temporary attention. In any social dynamic, whether personal or professional, the moment you show weakness, you invite exploitation. Not always because others are malicious, but because human behavior is opportunistic by nature. People test boundaries. They push limits, they probe for vulnerabilities, and when they find someone who tolerates disrespect, someone who forgives easily, bends constantly, and accepts poor treatment, they instinctively conclude that this person is safe to mistreat. Respect is not drawn from your intentions or how good your heart is. It is drawn from the signals you project and the standards you enforce. To remain in a situation where you are disrespected is to give silent permission for it to continue. You may not say the words, but your presence affirms it. You think staying shows strength, but to them, it shows submission. You believe that by enduring, you are building loyalty. But what you are actually doing is dismantling your authority. In the eyes of the one mistreating you, your tolerance becomes weakness, and that weakness makes you disposable. They don't see your silence as noble, they see it as consent. This is how cycles of manipulation begin. Not always through dramatic betrayals, but through small, consistent compromises that erode your position. You let one insult slide, you ignore one betrayal. You stay one day too long, and soon your entire value is diminished. Not because you lack it, because you allowed others to strip it away slowly. This erosion doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in silence, in hesitation, in all the times you failed to walk away when you should have. What begins as patience ends as powerlessness. To prevent exploitation, you must condition people on how to treat you, not through lectures or emotional pleas, but through decisive action. When you walk away from disrespect immediately, you communicate that your self-worth is non-negotiable. When you remain firm in your boundaries, even at the cost of relationships or opportunities, people learn that you cannot be manipulated. They may not like it. They may even push back harder. Deep down, they will respect it. Because strength, even when it's inconvenient, is always respected. Weakness, however, is always punished. The world does not coddle those who lack self-respect. It preys on them, it extracts from them, it uses them as tools, stepping stones, or emotional punching bags. The cruel irony is that the more you give, the more you are taken from. The more you tolerate, the more you suffer. And the more you hope people will change, the more they remain the same. Because why should they evolve when you've proven they don't need to? It is not your kindness that is the problem. It is your unwillingness to weaponize it with boundaries. There is nothing wrong with empathy. Empathy without discipline becomes a leash others use to drag you through their chaos. If you are constantly understanding, endlessly forgiving, and eternally available, you become easy prey. People learn that they can hurt you, and you will stay. That they can neglect you, and you will explain their behavior away. This makes you not admirable, but expendable. Every time you excuse disrespect, you send a message, I don't value myself enough to leave. And people respond to that message with more tests. They push further, wondering just how much they can take without consequence. You may think they'll stop, that they'll realize their mistake, that they'll eventually appreciate you. But human nature doesn't work that way. People don't stop exploiting what's easy to control. They stop only when the risk outweighs the benefit. Your ability to walk away is that risk. Your refusal to remain in disrespect is that consequence. This is why true strength is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand validation. It simply refuses to engage where it is not honored. When you make the decision to no longer explain yourself, to no longer beg for decency, to no longer lower your standards for the comfort of others, you become untouchable. You become someone who commands respect without asking for it. Because people know that if they cross a line, They won't get a second chance. They'll get your absence. There are those who confuse staying through disrespect with loyalty, but loyalty is never owed where there is no reciprocity. Staying where you are treated poorly is not noble. It is self-betrayal disguised as commitment, and in betraying yourself, you teach others to do the same. Your standards are the blueprint for how others engage with you. Raise them, and you elevate the interaction. Lower them, and you degrade the connection. Weakness is not always visible. It often hides behind patience, kindness, and love. No matter how noble the disguise, the effect is the same: exploitation. Others will take from you until you have nothing left. Not because they hate you, but because you've made it clear they can. And as long as you allow it, they will never stop. The only thing that ends this cycle is a firm refusal, not a conversation, not a warning, a walkout, a decisive departure from anything and anyone who has proven they do not deserve access to you. Walking away is not just a physical act. It is a calculated strike delivered with silence. It is one of the most profound weapons a man can wield in a world where people are addicted to control, validation, and dominance. When you walk away without noise, without complaint, without a need for attention, you do something that pierces deeper than confrontation. You disturb certainty. You turn expectations into fear. You dismantle their illusion of control. And that psychological shock is far more powerful than any outburst of emotion. Most people are used to patterns. They rely on your emotional attachment, on your predictable responses, on your unwillingness to cut ties. They count on the idea that you will always return, always explain, always seek closure. That is where their confidence lies, not in themselves, but in the predictability of your behavior. The moment you break that pattern by walking away with discipline and no explanation, you cause an internal collapse in their mental framework. The ground shifts beneath them because they no longer know what to expect. This confusion births reflection. This silence breeds respect. There is a unique fear that creeps in when someone you thought you had influence over simply chooses not to fight, not to beg, not to plead, but instead removes themselves. You can ignore a voice. You can dismiss a complaint. You can manipulate someone's emotions. But what do you do with a ghost? What do you do when someone no longer gives you the luxury of reaction? That emptiness becomes louder than any scream. That absence becomes a mirror they cannot avoid. In it, they see their flaws, their arrogance, their miscalculations. Walking away is not weakness, it is control. Pure, refined control. It shows that you are not governed by your emotions. It shows that you do not seek validation. It proves that you are not afraid of being alone. And that terrifies people. Because most people deep down are terrified of losing attention, presence, or access. The one who doesn't flinch when others expect him to fight back is not only powerful, he is dangerous. Because he cannot be baited. He cannot be pulled back into a game he already walked away from. And when you cannot be manipulated, you become immune to control. To walk away is to say, without words, I am the prize, not the beggar. You change the narrative entirely. You shift from seeking acceptance to demanding standards. Your silence becomes the standard. No warnings, no explanations, just a disappearance that leaves them with one thing they can't argue against: your absence. That absence forces them to examine their actions. It forces them to question whether they misunderstood your value, and that doubt infects their mind like a slow, unshakable poison. Even those who once seemed confident in dismissing you start to reevaluate. Because now, you're not trying to prove your worth. You've already decided it. You've chosen to no longer offer it to those who couldn't recognize it when it was present. You become untouchable in their memory. They romanticize your past presence, exaggerate your silence, and begin to feel the sting of what they've lost. Not necessarily because you were perfect, because they never thought they could lose you. This is the art of psychological warfare. Not through cruelty, but through distance. Not by saying something, by taking everything. And nothing is more threatening than a man who refuses to speak where speaking would serve no purpose. It shows that his ego is not fragile. It reveals a calm ruthlessness, the kind that doesn't shout, but simply exits. And in that exit, he says everything that needs to be said. Walking away rewrites the terms of engagement. You are no longer under anyone's influence. You are no longer waiting for clarity, apologies, or recognition. You don't need a verdict, because you've already walked out of the trial. That's the final blow. It doesn't break them instantly. It haunts them slowly. It creates internal chaos. They begin to question their own value, their behavior, their control. And that internal conflict is the price they pay for underestimating you. Those who depend on your reaction now have nothing. Those who fed off your emotional investment are now left starving. Those who disrespected your presence now suffer under the weight of your absence. And no matter how much time passes, they will remember that silence. Because silence, when it follows strength, is unforgettable. In relationships, in business, in any realm where power is exchanged, the man who walks away without a backward glance commands the highest respect. Not because he forced it, but because he showed that his dignity is not up for negotiation. He proved that he does not fear being misunderstood or unloved. He does not need to be seen or saved. He saves himself, walks alone, and lets silence settle the score. And while others scramble to recover control, he's already gone, too far ahead to reach, too silent to argue with, too complete to chase. In a world where presence is mistaken for weakness and tolerance is confused with approval, there comes a time when silence must speak louder than words. You are not respected for how much you give, how long you stay, or how often you forgive. You are respected for what you walk away from, for what you refuse to accept, for what you silently reject with unwavering discipline. Every time you choose to remain where you're disrespected, you shrink, but every step you take away from that disrespect expands your value. The man who walks away doesn't do so out of pride, but out of principle. He understands that loyalty without reciprocity is servitude, and availability without boundaries is self-destruction. When you walk away, you reclaim control. You teach others that your worth is not tied to their recognition. You no longer ask to be treated well. You expect it, and you leave when it's not given. You stop chasing approval and start embodying authority. Respect is not given to those who remain at the mercy of others. It's given to those who master the art of departure. So don't fight to stay in places where your voice is silenced. Don't explain yourself to people who thrive on your insecurity. Don't plead for acceptance in rooms where your absence would echo louder than your presence ever did. Let your silence become your message. Let your distance become your power. And let your ability to walk away become the weapon they never saw coming. Because in the end, they only respect you when you walk away,